I don't want to hear myself. I want to hear you.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. No.
Yeah, so what are you up to these days? First of all, I saw that except for Coffee and Coding podcast, you also started a podcast for podcasters.
I did, yeah.
So maybe tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I started that. I did one season. I did one season, I started it. I feel like I started it last November, October, or something. It was basically just because it seems like there was a lot of podcasts telling you about how to do podcasting and like what tools you should use and stuff like that. But there wasn't any podcast where you talk to people that are not, Radio Lab or big companies and have a podcast and kind of like what is their experience like and what have they learned that you could use and that kind of thing. So I basically just interviewed a bunch of people that have indie podcasts that do reasonably good downloads depending on what your definition of that is. And I ran that for like 13 episodes, I think. And then I've got like 5 more in the bank that I haven't edited yet. But I think the main thing is I got a lot of really positive response from the people who I had on the show. They were like, oh, this sounds great. Really good information. They love sharing it. But it didn't come close to doing the numbers that the Coffee and Coding podcast did. And so
But you are like just in the beginning because Coffee and Coding, you've already completed several seasons.
Yeah, well, the thing is, Coffee and Coding took off like really quickly. And to be honest, I don't know how. Like, I'm not great at marketing. I didn't do anything special. I think people just found it and I guess shared it. I don't know. And this one did okay, but it didn't do enough that I felt like people were going to get enough out of it because not that many people were listening. And I also feel like what I did, there's 13 episodes that are like an hour each. And if you listen to that and you're just starting a podcast, that's probably like a year's worth of material for you to try and learn all those things that they're talking about and do all those things. So I might get around to doing a second season, but yeah, it was fun. I like podcasting, so it was fun to do it. But I also like podcasting when people are actually listening. So, it's a bit
so what you say currently is that there are more software developers than podcasters.
I think my thing was I know kind of by default how to reach software developers because that's what I do. And podcasters is like, everyone's a podcaster, but not everyone wants to listen to a podcast about podcasting. So it's like if my main thing was I'm a podcaster and I had loads of people following me because I'm a podcaster, then I think the show would do really well. But that's not how it worked out. So, it was really
but actually I think it's like, I'm not sure that most software developers are eager to hear podcasts about software development as well, because I myself don't listen to many podcasts about software development. Yeah. So here and there, if I see something interesting, like if I see Jake Wharton being interviewed, then I will tune in and see what's going on. Yourself, some of your podcasts I heard, Gabor Varadi Juinden. He kind of goes always very, very deep into stuff, but I know that I will get, his perspective and I respect it. But generally speaking, if I see some, name that I don't know, haven't seen yet, most probably I will pass on that. And in some sense, I believe that once you've got a successful podcast, then maybe you can bring guests who will tune in for you, not for the guest. And then you can open doors.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I started the podcast because I also don't listen to, like, software development podcasts. Like, there's loads of them that are great, but that's not, like, for me, it's not interesting to hear people talking about code and different ways to write a function, and, like, that kind of stuff doesn't interest me. The stuff that interests me is, like, the conversation that we've had or the conversation I've had with other people, which is, like, it's around software, but like we don't get into the pros and cons of like, do you use a var or do you use a val or whatever those kind of things are? Because like for me, that's that's not interesting. I can go on Stack Overflow and find what I need. I don't need to listen to a podcast for it. So I would agree with you on that point for sure.
Yeah, and also there's something about software development that makes it difficult to discuss in words. So sometimes I tune into some podcasts and then they go down the rabbit hole and they share the context. So let's say the host and the guest, they know something about the topic, so they share the context and they start like going down the rabbit hole. And I'm like, guys, I lost you like 7 steps back. I haven't even started to understand. So if you don't see code, if you don't see diagrams, if you don't see all this stuff, it's very difficult to discuss software
Yeah,
this way.
I think that's the other thing as well. Is like podcasts, like passive listening. Like I'm listening, but if I miss something, I should be able to catch up. And when it's stuff like that, if you miss something, you can't catch up. You don't know where they are anymore, and you don't know when you lost it. So yeah. It's definitely for some people, but yeah, for me, no.
Yeah. So would you say, like, I mean, you have a podcast about software development and you have a podcast about podcasting, and I understand the total addressable markets issue, and that you want to produce something that people listen to, but you for yourself, like, do you think you enjoy more talking about podcasting or about software development? And also, I know it's a difficult and tricky question, but the guests that come, do you find yourself more interested in hearing the perspective of those who do podcasts or those who do software development?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I like both. I think the difference is when I do the podcast about podcasting, I usually don't know the answer. So I'm genuinely interested in the question that I'm asking, and I'm interested in the answer, and I want to find out more because they're telling me stuff that I want to use in my podcast. When I do the coffee and coding thing, like 70% of the time, I know the answer. Like I've done my research on the person, or we're talking about a topic that I know, but I have to ask the question in a way as if I don't know because the listener might not know. So then it's like, yeah, your answer's right and it's interesting, but it's not as interesting because I know the answer. So I'm basically just waiting for you to stop. Like, okay, cool, the person's listening has got what they came for, and then we'll move on to something else. And so I think, I don't know, I like them both. I think the thing that was fun about the podcast thing was, well, people that are listening, they're podcasters, right? So I could do fun things with it where I'd have like a intro that had like dramatic background music, and I added like scratches to cut up clips and stuff. And it's like, I don't know if people that listen to Coffee and Coding would appreciate it. I'm sure they would. But people that listen to podcasts, I had lots of comments from the people who I had on the show who then listened to the episode, and they were like, oh, the production value was great and all that kind of stuff. Whereas on the Coffee and Coding thing, I don't think anybody cares necessarily how the production value is, as long as they can hear what you're saying. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I enjoy doing that more in terms of like the post-production, but I enjoy doing the Coffee and Coding podcast more. One, because I know more people are going to get more out of it, and two, because I get to talk to people that I otherwise, in my industry, that I otherwise would never speak to, probably. Like me and you might trade Twitter a couple times and that would be it. But we would never have a conversation because I wouldn't see you anywhere. We're probably not going to similar events and all that kind of stuff. Whereas like this is the third time that I spoke to you, and it's going to be like an hour or 2 hours or whatever it's going to be. And that doesn't happen if I didn't have the podcast. So no,
exactly. And even if you
both.
Yeah, and even if we go to, let's say, software conference, and I've been at a couple, there was a period of time when I went to some conferences, gave some talks, and I found out that it's not really like they say, it's for socializing, but I don't like socializing in bits. You meet one person for 2 minutes and another one for 5 minutes, and another one for 10. And if you met someone you're really would like to talk to, well, you've got like 1 hour. That's the top of top. If you invite them over for a beer later, maybe you've got 1 hour of that person. Yeah. So something about this format also allows me to actually dig deeper into the perspective of the person I like to talk to. And I don't have this time constraint because we box the time ahead of time. So I know that I have you, and you'll not run away.
100%. Yeah. No, 100%. I was going to say also, I think it's like, you get to skip over all the kind of like surface level conversation. Like when you first meet somebody, you don't go into like the deep, like not deep questions, but you don't go into like, questions that you're going to ask me. You wouldn't just meet me on the street and then be like, hey Rob, I saw you have 2 podcasts, podcast, and you wouldn't do that. But with this, it's like this social agreement that you can just cut through all of that and we could just get straight into it. And then by the end of it, it's like we know each other better than if we had met in real life, because it would have probably took us like 5 meetings to get to this point or something. Yeah.
When you say that, I think about, it's like Tinder for people who want to talk to each other.
Yeah,
because, if you approach, like, I'm married now, so it's not for me, but I remember long time ago. When you approach someone at a pub, you have this very strange situation when you don't know if that person will talk to you. Are they interested? Are they free? Like maybe you bother them. So you approach very carefully, respectfully, and you have all this social stuff that you need to take care of. And on the other hand, if you meet someone on Tinder or a similar app and you kind of agree to meet, then ahead of time, that person at the very least, they're interested to see you. You can just skip right through the interesting parts.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, this is very similar. It's like we don't have to have a conversation. I'm like, oh, am I boring you? Or you're like, oh, does Rob really want to talk to me? Because it's like, I would have said yes if I didn't want to. Yeah. And
I think it's good if I clarify that when I mean, like maybe some young people will hear that podcast.
Sure.
When I say that on Tinder you get an agreement to skip to the interesting part, I don't mean that you need to grab hair right away. I meant just talking, right? Yeah. Hold yourself for 15, 20 minutes at least. That's a good
Yeah.
good thing. Okay, great. So I hopefully will be able to sustain my podcasting goal this time. So I'll definitely. I would like to talk to people who interest me. I want to kind of, let's say, expand my own understanding of the freelancing landscape and job landscape in general, because I work as a consultant, as a freelancer like yourself. And every time I work with clients from different country, I find out that the culture and the procedures and, all kinds of, again, it goes back to social, but both social and also procedural stuff are very different. So I'm very curious how it works in different places in the world.
Yeah.
And so that's one of my goals. Another goal is just to have, maybe the first goal is just to have fun and learn something new. And as you said, the coding and technology topics are very interesting at a very high level, but podcast is not a very good medium to get into, let's talk about concurrency.
Yeah.
This won't work. But I do want to understand, how people look at the technology, and more, let's say, my focus is on professionalism. So because let's say there are developers whom I disagree with, but I consider them professionals. So maybe we, technically disagree on 80% of the stuff, but I want to understand how they think about these things, not exactly which frameworks, which languages they use. That's maybe less important, but I do want to understand their perspective, how they approach problems and these kind of things, because I find that, as I go through my career and as I learn more and as I develop one project after another, I see a lot of code written and a lot of projects written by other developers. And so more and more I lose faith in the idea that, there's one way to do it right.
Yeah.
So there are multiple ways, of course, but there are also many more ways to do it wrong.
Yes.
And I'm really curious how people look at that and what makes some developers choose the better approaches as compared to others. Is it like because they know better? Is it like because they're more talented and maybe their IQ is higher? Or maybe is it just because, they reside in some place, maybe even geographically, where like there is some kind of a cultural drive for excellence and stuff. So I'm really curious about that. I would like to explore this topic to understand how people approach problems. And maybe sometime, for years I wanted to write a book about something.
Okay.
And so I constantly think about, I need to write a book. I want to kind of capture my knowledge in some tangible form.
Right.
But then, like, writing a book is a very difficult task, and I would like to write about something which will not age in several years. So, for example, writing about Android is no go.
Sure.
I'm not going to write a book about Android. Yeah. So I constantly look about some important topic to discover. Maybe that one, I think maybe that's something that I might be interested. So that's my goal, to have fun and learn as much as I can about people who do software for a living and how they approach problems, how they look at that, and learn something new.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be my goal.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. I was going to say on the point about why do people do things badly. I always personally, at least from my experience, it's come down to lack of experience. I don't think they think they're doing things badly. I think they think they're doing things really well based on the fact that they don't have the experience to know that they're doing things badly. That's at least from what I've seen. Because
So let's
a lot of projects like that.
Let me push back on that a little bit, because maybe you just need to clarify what you mean by experience, because there is no shortage of developers. Like, I mean, I've been on one project. I helped one company, and I meet the team, and one of the developers on the team right away, right out of the gate, he said, "My name is something, okay, and I've been developing for Android from." I don't remember, but let's say 2009 or something like that.
Sure.
So he had twice as much experience as I do, at least.
Yeah.
And then turned out that he wasn't like the best developer on the team, and in some sense he was like he in my estimation slowed the entire team down. Yeah. So lack of experience wasn't his problem. So, like, what is that makes some developers understand it and some don't?
So, see, I would still say that that's lack of experience based on the fact that if you've been doing Android, let's say, or any technology, it doesn't have to be Android, from 2009, right? So as we record this, that's like 13 years, and you still do things badly, personally, I would say you're not experienced enough. And the reason is because I don't feel like it comes down to time. It's like, let's say if I start a job in 2009 and I've been there for, let's say I've done one job the entire time, and when I got there I didn't know a lot and I learned from the other developers, and within 3 years I was the lead developer, but I'm only ever working on this project, and I don't go home and learn anything else, and I don't follow blogs, and I don't follow YouTube channels, then I think everything I know is great. I'm the lead developer on this project, I'm in charge, and I've been doing it for 13 years. And then they would go to another company and realize, like, oh crap, like how I do things, nobody does this anymore. So, like, I think it depends how you, like, in my head, experience is like the knowledge that you have, not necessarily the time that it takes to get there. Because you could learn a lot in 3 years and know more than someone who's done the same thing for 13 years. And
exactly. So what do you mean by it boils? You say that developers who don't do that, it boils down to experience. But in the industry, when people talk about experience, they usually
time.
Exactly how long you've been doing this thing that you and especially when you like look for a job, right? Your experience is just your tenure at some company.
Yes.
No one cares. I mean, good interviewers, they will care. They will ask you about exactly what you've been doing at that company. And then it turns out that you worked at some huge FANG company, right? On a huge team, and you was responsible for 3 buttons, and that was your job for 2 years. Optimizing the conversion of 3 buttons, which is important, but for a startup looking for someone who can bootstrap their entire product, that's not exactly a very good qualification, even though you worked at FANG. So what would you say about the experience? What do you mean by experience then?
I think it's just how much, I mean, I guess, like, I never really thought about how to word it, but it's like, for me, as being a freelancer contractor, it's like I'm working on, let's say, at minimum 2 different projects a year. So if I've been doing this right now since 2012, that's 10 years. So I've worked on at least 20 different projects, right? So the first 2 that I came on board, I didn't know that much. I learned a bunch from the senior developers, lead developers. Going to the next project, I know a little bit more. Going to the next project, I know a little bit more. And by the time I get to where I am now, like, I know a lot. So I can look at code and say, this is bad code because I've seen it 10 years ago and I've seen 7 different ways to make it better. And I think it's not necessary. I think experience is just how much exposure you have to different things and different ways of working. And I think if you get stuck in one place for a long time, you don't have the opportunity to do that unless you do it for yourself. But even still, it's not the same thing as someone else telling you specifically, like, oh, this is not a good way to do this specific thing. So, like, you might learn a bunch of concepts, but if you're, like, boxed in, like, how you're doing stuff is right, you wouldn't be able to see that, oh, this other thing is better. So, yeah, I feel like, I don't know if experience is the right word, but it's definitely, like, a level of exposure. And at least from what I've seen.
Exposure is a good word.
Maybe it's exposure, yeah. Because from what I've seen, like I've been on tons of projects where you go and it's like, mate, this code is a mess. Like, how did you pay these people this much money to write this? And I think that's because I've had enough exposure to know, like, you know, there's 10 different ways to do this better. This one's faster. This one's the proper way to do it. This one's like the middle ground where, you know, other developers won't think it's terrible, but it will get you to where you need to be in 2 months. And I think, yeah, people that don't have that experience, they just like, I feel like everybody thinks that what they do is great until they find a better way to do it. And if you don't have the exposure of better ways to do it, then you're just always going to be like, this is the best. And people that are hiring you don't know because, you know, they're not in the code. They don't know what they're looking at. They just know if it works or it doesn't work. And if you tell them like, oh, it's broken and it's going to take me 6 weeks to fix it, they don't know that actually another developer could fix it in a day because they don't know. So they're just like, oh, this is great. And it's not till somebody else that's more experienced and has more exposure comes on board and they're like, mate, let's just scrap this whole thing. I'll rebuild it in 2 months and it will be 50 times faster. So yeah, I think probably exposure is a better word than experience.
Yeah, exposure sounds like I too can put this into words. I try to formulate what would I consider to be preconditions for being a good developer. Yeah. So let's put like the talent part aside because, you know, people are different and some are like more talented, some are less talented. Yeah, but in general, I think like, I mean, most people whom I met, they could be much better than they are right now. Yeah. So regardless of, you know, not everyone can be some rockstar Jake Wharton level of developer, but everyone can improve. And some people just don't improve. Like they work, as you said, you know, they work maybe on the same project, and exposure is a very interesting way to put it in my estimation because like when you get all these feedbacks, when you get different perspectives, then you learn. But if you just get one perspective, you know, you start your role, and maybe even it's a good perspective. Like, it's also a problem, right? Developers who joined, that was like it's not the problem exactly. Problem is not the problem. But the first team where I worked was absolutely amazing, and I had great manager. And somehow I assumed that that's the standard in the industry. So my second job was absolute disaster. I was like, guys, like, what's going on here? We're 5 developers working on something that really one developer should work on. Like, why there are 5 of us? Yeah. So, I mean, like, you need to have exactly like exposure to different levels of good and bad practices. Yeah. And then you can decide for yourself. That's a very good word, exposure. Yeah. So what will be the good?
You asked me, but.
Yeah, what would be the good ways, in your opinion, for someone to get exposure to, let's say, more, let's put aside the good or bad because it's a very subjective understanding, but someone who looks to get more exposure to improve, what would be the good ways?
I mean, for me, the number one way is to work on, as like, the reason I like doing freelancing is because of the amount of exposure you get to all different projects. Like, you could take, you know, at the UK, if you do a contract, let's say the minimum length is 3 months. If you did 4 contracts a year, that's 4 different projects that you've worked on with probably 10 different developers.
Is it like some kind of law, a rule that a minimal duration of contract is 3 months?
No, it's like I've done contracts that are literally like 2 weeks because they just want me to cover someone's holiday. But generally speaking, like a minimum length of a contract, generally speaking, would be 3 months. Average is like 6. But even if you did 6 and say you did 2 a year, that's 2 different projects. And I think for me, like, the gold standard is working with as many different developers on as many different projects as you can, because not everyone, like, to your point, everyone does things differently. There's not one right way to do stuff, right? Like in the Android world, people will be like, oh, if you don't do MVVM, then you're doing it wrong. But it's like, that's not the case. Like, sure, if you read the documentation and you just listen to like a certain few people on Twitter, then that's the case. But in real life, you go into a project that has like, there's all different ways that you could architect stuff and hybrid approaches, and that doesn't make them wrong, but you need that exposure to know that. And I think if you're in a job and you don't have the opportunity to do that, then I think the next best thing is like, just write your own stuff and open source it and like ask people for feedback, or you know, make pull requests on other people's projects and let them like PRs are a great way to get feedback, you know, because you can get like, you know, speaking for myself, I've been doing this for 10 years. I could get someone who's been doing it for 1 year, write a comment on my PR, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I never thought of that.
Exactly.
And so it's like you need all those different feedback. So like for me, it's any different way you can get it. And then yeah, if you don't want to do that, then you know, go and watch some YouTube videos about ways to do stuff. But don't just watch one. You know, go and watch the YouTube video that says MVVM is the only way to do things, and then go watch the YouTube video that says MVVM is the worst, and then see the pros and cons, and then form an opinion, and then you could take it to your project and be like, hey guys, have you thought about doing this? And like for me, yeah, the gold standard is you need to be doing it in real life, working on different projects, working with different people. But if that's not possible, then you just need to find the best way, like the most ways you can get exposure.
So I will ask you a provocative question, provocative question.
Yeah.
A new developer, they've just, let's say, graduated or completed some kind of a course, or maybe even self-taught. So some talented new developer, and they get two offers, one from a very big company and one from, let's say, software development agency. Okay. And as usually goes, the offer from the big company is even better in terms of, like salary or whatever, the compensation.
Yeah.
So would you say that, like, what would be your framework for that new developer to decide between working at a big company, which provides all these benefits and perks, versus working at a company where they will probably get more exposure because, you know, software development company, they will get different projects, they will see all kinds of shitty code. So that's like and in the big software development company, they also can see very shitty code, but just one type of it.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the first part, I feel like the obvious part that comes into it is like, what situation are you in personally? Because like, if you have a mortgage and you have kids and you're going to get paid, you know, 40,000, whatever at one place, and the other place is going to pay you 100, and you need the 100, then that's the role that you take. And the rest of it, what I'm going to learn, how good a developer I'm going to be, that goes to the back, right? But assuming that's not the case, and either way, you're going to be fine. I mean, probably I would take the agency work, I think. But I guess it depends as well on like the agency, because you might go into an agency where it's no different than being at a big software company. They have 6 developers, but these 6 developers work on every project. So every project looks the same. So regardless if you're working for agency project A or you're working on agency project B, the code base looks the same. The way they do things looks the same. The PR comments you get is the same. So I think agency work would be better, but ideally it would be agency work where the agency is hiring you out to other companies. So they're not in-house building every project, but they're hiring you out to other companies to supplement their developers. And then you're getting a wide range of exposure to.
But in that case, I know this type of agencies, but in that case, they're usually hiring you out for a very prolonged period of time. That might be like a year or a year and a half.
Yeah, maybe.
So to get the next exposure, like, I mean, I would say, you know, you're a new developer and you consider like the better in terms of compensation or the better in terms of exposure. But if the exposure that you get is like just instead of one project, you will be working on 2 projects over the course of a 2-year period, then maybe it's not worth. But yeah, I definitely hear what you say. Like you will need to choose differently. But yeah, I used to like look down on agencies. Yeah. And recommend people to stay away with them. But now, after I met several people and several of my friends kind of got into the industry through agencies, I think it's a very viable path, because what you learn at an agency, and I mean, if it's a really agency that you can kind of see several projects, if it's just one project and you sit there for a year or a year and a half, then it's probably not that. But if you can hop on different projects, and if shit hits the fan every week, you know, and you're constantly being thrown into all kinds of to close holes, you know, kinds of projects. On the one hand, it's very stressful, but on the other hand, it's really, really good way to get an experience. And in many cases, I think the experience and the perspective that you get, as you said, exposure that you get, might actually compensate for the like material loss in the longer term, because like your career, well, I mean, again, as you said, now if it's someone in their 30s making the switch to software development, they have mortgage, kids, and then, sure. I mean, you don't have that much of freedom to choose. The job that pays better is probably the one you take. But if it's like someone in their 20s and they have the time, they can invest 1-2 years to start their career in the best possible way, that might be actually a very good segue into stuff. And then after a year or 2 years tenure in such a place, and hopefully you don't, even though the work is usually maybe less satisfying, and in some cases it's more stressful, because at big companies you can just relax. Oftentimes there's so many developers, and they are so into mentoring and giving you the time and the space to get it. I mean, a big company, when they hire a developer, I think for the first month they don't even count on them doing anything really. So in agency, the other side of this spectrum is like a freelancer, right? A consultant. They hire you, and in 3 days you need to deliver. So that's the other side of the spectrum. And agency is somewhere in between, because they hire you to do the work, but maybe you will get some kind of an onboarding. So maybe you'll have a grace period of a week or 2 weeks to get into it, and then you start working.
Yeah, I think so. Like a gig that I did recently. Even me, I generally come on board and expect day one I'm making PRs and I'm committing code, and the person that was project manager on that project was obviously new to having contractors on, because she was like, I think we should give Rob 2 weeks before we expect him to do anything. And it's okay, it's fine, I'm still doing work. I wasn't I'm going to take 2 weeks off. But I imagine coming from an agency, that's kind of how they look at it, where it's yes, you can do stuff, but either we'll give you time. And generally I think what they would do is they'd give you low priority stuff. So it's if you deliver it in 3 days, it's amazing. If you deliver it in a month, it's still going to make the deadline and it's fine. They won't give you anything that's time critical or critical to the project yet, because they feel like they need to ease you in.
And what's your freelancing model? How do you find clients, and what kind of contracts do you enter?
So I mostly, I would say, do 90% contract work, which is I had Don Felker on the podcast recently. I haven't released that one yet, and he was that's the one I'm going to listen to, definitely. Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been trying to get him on for ages, and then Florian got him on his podcast, and I was like, oh man, this guy doesn't reply to my emails, but Florian got him on. And then he replied to an email that I'd sent a year previous, and he was like, hey Rob, do you still want me on the show? And I was like, yes. And it's really interesting, but he said we all talk about freelancing, meaning freelancing as in, I go and find a client, they give me X amount of money to build something, I go build it whenever I fancy building it, as long as I deliver it by the date I told them will be there. And that's a freelance project. But we also say freelancing to mean contracting, which is what the majority of people generally that say freelancing mean, which is I get contracted by a company for, 1 month or 3 months or 6 months. And I get paid, I think in the US, you get paid hourly. In the UK, you get paid daily. So however many days you work or however many hours you work, that's what you get paid for. You don't get paid based on the delivery of something like you do with a traditional freelance project. So I primarily do contracts, and the way that works generally is I find almost all of my work through recruiters. A couple of times now it's been through friends that I've worked with on projects, and then they go somewhere else and hey Rob, we need another developer. But generally it's through recruiters, either on LinkedIn or a good trick I found was if you just put your CV on just random job websites. So just go on random job websites and apply for any job in your field. Somehow it ends up your CV ends up getting sent to all these recruiters. I assume they have an affiliate program or something with these job sites. I don't know. And
these recruiters, they will explicitly look for a freelancer, or they look for a full-time employee, and you just tell them, look guys, I'm doing contracts for, let's say, half a year, but not full-time employee.
Yeah. No, so generally speaking, at agencies, at least in the UK, I assume it's very similar to other places, but I can only speak for here. A recruitment agency has a department that deals with full-time employees, and they have a department that deals with contracts. So a company will go to them and say, we need an iOS developer for 6 months. And then they will start, messaging around developers, going on LinkedIn, putting up job posts and stuff. So for me, I find all my work through recruiters generally. which will be I get a phone call and email saying, "Hey Rob, are you looking for work? We have this client. They want someone to come in for 6 months to work on this project. This is how much you're going to get paid. Are you interested?" If you say you're interested, they put you forward for the role. The client will ask you to interview if they're interested. And then usually it's either a 1 or 2 stage. Usually it's like a 1 stage where there's not really a coding thing. It's just they go in, the lead developer might ask you a couple of questions to make sure you're not just made up your CV and you actually have some idea of what you're talking about. They'll see if you're a good culture fit, and then that's basically it. And then you go in and you're working on whatever project it is, and every day, or they usually work in sprints, like 2-week sprint, X amount of tickets, you deliver this work, it gets tested, etc., and that's it. And then you're basically there for 6 months, and at the end of 6 months, if it's a 6-month contract, it's either finished and they're happy with you, you're happy with them, and it's finished, or they might have more work and they'll be like, "Rob, do you want to extend?" And then you can renegotiate pay and all that kind of stuff.
Wow, that's very interesting, because I haven't heard of this type of engagements in Israel where I live.
Yeah.
And basically, I think 0 time recruiters approached me about freelance work. Usually recruiters,
really?
Yeah, and LinkedIn, usually recruiters just send full-time jobs. They like us. We have this nice job. Would you be interested? And sometimes I just reply, "Oh, guys, I'm doing freelance. So if you'd like me," and it's like crickets, because somehow the recruiters don't deal with freelancers in Israel,
right?
And therefore it's very interesting that in UK it's different. So I think basically 0 of my jobs, of my gigs, like I found through recruiters.
Okay.
And in Israel,
it's primarily word of mouth then.
A lot of it is word of mouth. Some of it are friends.
Yeah.
And like in the past, let's say 2, maybe 3 years, some of it are like my blog.
Okay, that's cool.
So people who we've been reading your blog, and you seem to know about what you're talking about. So we have this problem, etc. And also in the past, let's say year, also a little bit leads from my courses. Basically,
nice. Okay,
students who took my courses and then went on to work on at some companies, or just someone asked them about freelancers and consultants, and then they just said, "Okay, we don't know any, but this guy took his course and he seems to be
right.
All right, yeah." So that's a very interesting cultural difference, because really in Israel, HR people, they don't deal with freelancers as much as I know. And many companies, when they need this kind of contractor for a couple of months, they actually go to agencies. We have a lot of agencies, they will go to agencies, and agency will either there are agencies that can give you an entire team, or they can give you a developer. So it's not something that individuals usually do, at least not something that I am aware of. And also the contracts that you sign, I haven't heard of any freelancer signing a predefined length, like 6 months contract. Usually, you sign, usually you sign a hourly contract, let's say. Mm-hmm. So you will say I work this amount of hours and each hour that much money costs you. Or I myself prefer always close contracts for specific projects, because hourly contracts, I think they align the incentives not optimally, because for the company, they don't know what they get for what they pay. And then also good developers, it's very you've got a company and they're looking for someone, and they approach you and say, "What's your hourly rate?" And just throwing out, you say $100 an hour. Yeah. Okay, that's your hourly rate. And then they have three other proposals for $50 an hour. Yeah. And it will be very difficult for them to choose the 100-hour proposal, even though maybe you are the top 1% in this specific niche. Maybe you have the relevant experience. Maybe you can save them hundreds of hours. You can maybe the other developer who will work for 50 hours will completely tank their project. Yeah. But just the optics of having 150 makes it very difficult for, let's say, at least for me, when I charge hourly, really, that's something that happened with a client about 2 months ago. Okay. So I've had this very interesting project, and like really complex project. They work on some AI to automatically process heart ultrasound recordings. So they develop algorithms to automatically infer like whether you have some heart problem. And they worked for a lot of time until their algorithm, they trained it on data, and then they had to develop the client.
Yeah.
And so I wrote for them this application, like we defined the project and I've worked on it. And as usual, I've worked 25% more. that's the standard. It's never the initial requirements. And then they told me like, we might need your help going forward for a couple of months because we deployed the system. We need to support it.
Yeah.
And then I usually don't do that, but I really like these guys and I really like medical stuff. I worked on several medical projects, so I really like medical stuff because it makes you like feel that you're part of something bigger. It's not like most of my clients, they're probably somewhere in the vicinity of fintech, and that's just not that satisfying. So I made an exception and I sent them an offer, and the offer said like, I will work for you. I think it was for 40 hours a month. For a specific amount of time. Yeah. And then they came back to me and they say like, that's like too expensive for us. We thought about something much less expensive. Mm-hmm. And the worst part, and eventually we didn't go there, right? Okay. So I don't know, they will look for someone else. But the worst part of it is that they're very happy about the delivery the initial delivery of the project, right? Yeah. It was a very complex application, I had to take images, screenshots, and process them in real time, and multi-threading, and then different levels of compression to make sure that, we can push them through the bandwidth of the network. Like, very non-trivial project. They were very happy, no bugs. After like 1.5 months, I worked like weekends and stuff. Right. Really happy. And for the client, I don't care. But for the client, the bad part is that the contract that I offered them afterwards, that they said is too expensive for them, the hourly rate was lower than what they actually paid me for the initial project. So it's really the incentives of hourly work do not align well for freelancers and for the companies, unless of course, a freelancer looks for stability. Mm-hmm. And the company looks for the illusion of control, because when they've got this hourly work, they kind of feel that, we know how many hours this freelancer works. Yeah. And that's really sad, and I try not to be there. So I tried several times hourly work, and I several times told myself, you're not going to do hourly work anymore, never. Okay. Yeah. And every time I make an exception, it just doesn't work well. Yeah. Because when I've got these small projects, they're not necessarily small, but I mean really defined projects. Mm-hmm. When the deliverable, I write a proposal, you get this kind of deliverable, I deliver it, and usually the clients are very happy. But once it gets to hourly work, it very quickly turns into some kind of a employment agreement, or and and I feel that the clients themselves, they become like, they stop valuing my time. Yeah. So they're like, okay, I'm now, they know they have me. Yeah. So, like if something like I've been waiting on one project for designs for about a month. Yeah. And they pay me a retainer fee, of course. Yeah. So I don't work, but they still pay me something. Sure. Yeah. And like, they don't care. From their perspective, my contract, my retainer fee is already written into their budget, and it's not that high. Okay, it's high when we kind of discuss the engagement, but once the engagement is closed, it's nothing, because it's like the person who negotiates the price with you, they're like, oh, you're charging too much or something. But for the entire company, your like salary as a freelancer, that's like peanuts. Unless it's some startup at the very beginning of their way, bootstrapped, of course. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, for a big, let's say, fintech company or major fintech company, it's like nothing, peanuts. Yeah. So it's just the fact that you need to negotiate that, and then they stop valuing your time, and then they can't really evaluate what they get for that amount of investment. That's why I try to stay away of hourly contracts, and always try to get it like to some, that's the deliverable, that's the price.
Yeah.
You pay the price, you get this deliverable, and usually they are very happy about that, because I also try not to take, like many people come to me and, we need to write this simple app, and I tell them right away, guys, like it's like, there's these services, Upwork, amazing developers work there. You will get what you need for 1/5 of a price. And, these people, they will also support you, something that I will probably not be able to do. So just go there. That's your route. And sometimes I take hourly work, and then almost universally I regret that. So it's very interesting.
I think it's about the control thing. I wouldn't like also about hourly work, because then it's like I'm on someone else's time. It's like when I do my contracts, like sometimes I do like what you say, close contracts, which I like, because it's whenever I work, it doesn't matter. The price is the price. It's going to be delivered at this point. If I do it at night or if I do it in one day or whatever, it doesn't matter. If like I take a contract and you get paid day rate, like I think I feel more comfortable about it, because like essentially the day is still my own, right? So like I'm getting paid because I'm working that day, but I could work, from 7 a.m. till 9 and not do anything for 4 hours, and then work like the next 2 hours, and all they're measuring is deliverables. So you're not getting paid an hourly rate, so I don't have to bank my time. It's just if I work today, I either worked a half a day or I worked a whole day, and that's basically how it works out. And then it feels more comfortable than I wouldn't like. I also would not like to do hourly work, because it would feel like
and in hourly work
sometimes
sometimes they also try to estimate the cost of every single feature. So they will come to you and like, we have this and that. Could you please estimate how long will it take? And then you're like,
no idea.
I mean, first of all, no idea. And second, like, you don't want to give price. Instead of giving one price, you find yourself giving price every day. So it's like...
Yeah, that's the other thing. And also, like, estimations are funny, because it's like, at a high level, I can tell you, like, this is a big task or this is a small task.
Exactly.
But when I get into it, like, I might get the task done in 5 minutes and be fighting with Gradle for 6 hours, and that's still your time. You're still paying me for that. So it's like, it's really hard to estimate stuff like that at that, like, granular level.
Yeah, over the years, by the way, I found myself, like, today I can estimate projects to a relatively high degree of accuracy. And by that, I mean 25%. I mean, like, if my estimation falls within 25%, and we're talking about usually, it's hundreds of hours. So I cannot estimate one single task that will take me like 1 hour or 5 hours, as you said, because they're like, but on average, when you see some requirement and you break it down into some components, and then you kind of estimate, and then on average, if you do like real estimation and you understand what you're talking about, some of your estimations will be off, like, you will underestimate, with some of them you will overestimate, but the average will kind of converge. And lately, like for the past, let's say 2-3 years, I feel that I became much better at estimation. So like initially when I started freelancing, there were at least 2 projects that I completed on like half the price or third the price, because I couldn't estimate properly, and I gave a price which seemed fair to me, and then it turns out that you've got twice as much work than you anticipated. And that's the risk with like fixed price projects, that if you cannot estimate properly and you underestimate, and usually software developers underestimate.
I was going to say, I would always add like 25%. So whatever, even if I'm 100% sure this is how long it's going to take, I would still add 25%. Also, because a client's going to be much happier if you give them the product a month early than if you give them a product 2 months late because you estimated it wrong, And then also, you lose out less on money, because there's always the opportunity for you to not get paid for work because it takes you too long to complete.
Yeah, I usually don't. I mean, I usually commit to some timeline, approximate timeline, but I don't let it skip more for, let's say, a week here and there. And then if I underestimate, and that's what happened at the very beginning of my freelancing career, this just means that I work like weekends.
Basically.
It's out my weekends. So today I work weekends, but I went exactly when you are late, it's like it becomes so difficult.
It's like a burden now. You just have to get it done.
Yeah. And whatever you do, you remember that you have this contract and you need to finish it.
Yeah.
So that's a big risk. So I would say, like, for if you're a freelancer and you're just starting working hourly or daily or whatever is accustomed in your area, that's fine. But eventually, if you want to, like, first of all, kind of craft for yourself a little bit of peace of mind, and also if you want to earn more, because again, in Israel, like, I don't know what the price is, but I think like charging $200 an hour in Israel will be exceptionally difficult. I mean, you probably wouldn't. Maybe some companies would pay for that, but for software development, like Android development, charging $200 an hour is like very, very high price, and I don't think many companies, if any, will agree to that. But if you get a full project and you estimate properly and you are good at it, you can do it quickly. Then you can, like, your average can end up in this range and maybe even more. Surely even more if you, like, some companies, because for companies paying $200 an hour, it's like not companies, but like the person who you negotiate with, the person who signs on your like, gives the approval of your offer. For them, $200 an hour might look very, very high price. But $20,000, for a project, exactly, they look like some kind of a strategic project for their company. That's like, okay, fine, let's start. When do you start? And for them, after they pay the $20,000, they don't care. It will take you 100 hours or 200 hours to complete. So if you can complete it in 100 hours, great. If you can complete it in 50 hours, like, even better. Amazing. You've just...
exactly. It's what you said. A lot of that is optics, because it, like, even to someone listening right now, like $200 an hour sounds a lot, but $20,000 to deliver an entire project doesn't sound like a lot of money.
Well, it depends on the geography, right? Because, like, some company in India or somewhere there where, the GDP is lower, $20,000 is a huge amount of money. And for someone in Silicon Valley, they're like $20,000.
$20,000 probably sounds like a scam to them, because it's not enough money.
And it's like, we have like snacks in our office and we spend more on that. So something here is off. Exactly. So the optics of hourly work, I don't like that. I've never worked per day. I would like to try that maybe one time, but just in Israel, you don't get, it's not a cultural thing. I think my potential clients will be very surprised if I would ask them to pay me per day.
I was going to say, what's the, I don't know what the laws and stuff around, because like Israel is an hour time difference from here, right? And I see a lot of contracts come up, at least here for Europe. And because it's remote, it's like I could do that and I could work for a company in Germany and they're an hour time difference, but it's fine. But I don't know what the kind of laws are around, like if you could take a contract that's, UK based or EU based, because there's a ton of them going around. There's like, if you could do that, then that's a really good entry into like doing the day rate stuff.
But I think in Israel, I would guess that most companies will never take someone from Western Europe. Because you can always take freelancers from Eastern Europe, and that's actually what many companies do, either freelancers or agencies. So just in Eastern Europe, you can get people at much lower, like twice lower rate.
Makes sense,
So that's what many companies do today. Because in Israel, we have kind of always, there are like too few developers around, especially talented ones. So if someone can reach out to, let's say, Ukraine, Poland, and hire someone for like, maybe it's even like, they used to be very cheap, these guys, but now since the world became global and they understand their value, they kind of value their work in terms of the company and the location that hires, and not in terms of their local costs. So today I know that it's relatively the same price. So let's say you can spare, let's say 20-30% on hiring someone in Ukraine through agency than hiring a developer in Israel. But still, it's much simpler in terms of like legal obligations, because if you hire someone in Israel, you have all this additional stuff, and they're like freelancers, and also you can find much better candidates, because like you can hire someone with much more experience there Because in Israel, like all these companies, Amazon, Google, Fang, and etc., they all compete for the local talent. So if there's a good developer here, your options are pretty much unlimited.
Right. I gotcha.
So it's very hard for companies. I constantly, I get calls from friends all the time, like, if you know that type of developer, that type. And I'm like, no, guys, first of all, I don't know that many developers. And second, all good developers whom I know, they're already employed. And It's a very rare occurrence that a good developer is unemployed.
Yeah, I was going to say that happens to me a lot as well, because when recruiters ring, like if someone rings me tomorrow and like, Rob, are you free? I'm not free. Do you know anybody that is free? And it's generally like, yeah, I know, like, let's say I know 6 other really good developers, but all of them are working because they're like, they stay on the market for like days. That's it. And then they're gone. Yeah,
that's a very tough thing. But actually, like, I'm kind of, I've been employing a developer from Upwork.
Yeah.
And this guy, he's relatively non-experienced. Just 2 years of experience he had when I hired him, and he's amazing, from Ukraine. So people who look for talent and can invest and understand, because like HR people or people who are not into specific areas that they want to hire for, they just have random chance of finding a good developer. But let's say I looked for an Android developer, I interviewed a couple of guys, and out of all of them, I took this guy who had like, all other folks were like 5 years and more experience in Android, and this one had 2. I interviewed him and said, well, this one looks good for me. And he's just absolutely amazing.
Nice.
Amazing developer. Of course, he lacks experience, but he compensates with his, willingness to learn and work. Yeah. And it's just a joy to see him, he became a very integral part of the project. I found it for the client, and basically, even though he's a freelancer there through Upwork, he's like an integral part of that project. So it was amazing to see him grow.
Yeah.
And I think last time we talked, you also said to me that you kind of like bringing new developers and connecting them. So maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah, sure. You mentioned that to me on Twitter, and I was like, I don't remember saying that. And then I checked the end of the podcast, and I was like, oh yeah, I did say that. So the thing that I was talking about the last time we spoke was through the podcast. A bunch of people had messaged me about like, Rob, how do I go freelance? I had one guy that I told you about where he was, he'd learned all the things on YouTube and courses and all that kind of stuff. And he was asking me like, Rob, what else do I need to know to be able to get a job? And I was like, well, what do you know? And he told me, I know this and this and this. And I was like, well, you know more than I know, so I don't think it's going to be a problem. And it was one of those things where he didn't think because he had learned stuff on YouTube and he had learned stuff in just courses that he had, like what we're talking about, like the experience to be able to get a gig. And then I got a call about a gig that was, too junior for me. So I said, I know this guy. I sent his email address. He ended up getting the gig. And so now he's gone from like, I want to be an Android developer to like, I am an Android developer, because regardless of how he feels, he's getting paid to do it. So it's official. So I had a couple of scenarios like that from the podcast. And
these people who reach out and you help them, are they like geographically collocated with you, or they're distributed all across the world?
All over the place. So this guy I think he was in London somewhere. So that made it kind of easy because he's in the UK. But no, I've had messages from like, I did a talk to a class, I think it's like a university class over Zoom, that was based in the US somewhere. And then I had people messaging me after I did the talk asking me about like, hey Rob, how do I get into freelancing? What is it like? All that kind of stuff. So it's not necessarily geographically near me, but it's mostly, I think, what I try to do, because like you mentioned like mentoring when we were like messaging on Twitter, and it's like a lot of people do mentoring in the sense of what we were talking about earlier, like, okay, let me look at your code. This is good. This is not good. Have you thought about this? And like, there's plenty of people that you can find to do that, but there's not that many people that do mentoring in the sense of like this, like what we're talking about now. Like, this is what a project looks like. This is a way to estimate things. This is all the things that you won't learn from going on YouTube and typing.
Basically,
like
business.
Basically all the business stuff. So a lot of people that message me about that, I always go back to them and be like, this is what I think, or these are the things that you should look at, or have you thought about doing this? And that's kind of like my, I guess, like mentorship thing. Because I know at one point you said that you were looking at doing like an in-person, some sort of event or something. I think you said on the podcast. And I actually looked at, before COVID, doing like a course, like a 1-day or 2-day weekend course in London somewhere, like in person, because I wanted it to be in person, even though it could be on Zoom. And it would be like people that want to do this. So like they know their stuff, right? Like they've learned, they've been to university, or they've done a course, or they've followed YouTube, whatever. They know how to do this stuff, but they don't feel like they qualify to get a gig. And it would be like to get them to come in for like 2 days and just go through like in terms of coding, right? If you want to be an Android developer, this is the library everybody uses for images. This is the library everybody uses for networking. Here's the basics that you need to know. And by the end of the 2 days, you know enough that there's any job you could go into and you could get it. And like, sure, you won't be the most, experienced on the team, but you're good enough to go in there and get it. And then the people that are on the team will coach you up more. So I wanted to do that, and then COVID happened and that kind of didn't work out. But I think, like in terms of mentoring, mostly it's like the business stuff that I think is missing, and that's what I find interesting. That's why every time I get someone on the podcast that has a YouTube channel or they have a course, I always ask them, and I don't know if people listening pick up on it, because I always feel like it's super repetitive, but I always ask them, like, why do you do the YouTube channel? Or like, why do you do the course? Because I see courses on Udemy, they're always discounted for like $9.99. I don't know how much you get from that, but like, do you do it because of the money? What's the reason? And that's always because I find it interesting, is like everybody's doing something different to teach people stuff. And I assume it's not because of the financials, right? Because I haven't spoke to anybody yet that's like, oh yeah, I wrote this book and it made me £1 million. They're all just like, I wrote this book, it was cool. That was it. So yeah,
no, I know freelance. I know like content producers who earn a living, and for them it's a business.
Yeah.
But for me, actually, like I reached, let's say, I started on Udemy out of kind of curiosity, see what's going on, and then I reached the point. Now I'm actually at the point where I understand that if I invest now, it's a business.
Yeah.
Because I think I have like 30 or 40,000 students. I haven't checked lately, but I mean it's a good amount of students. So I'm past the initial stage where you don't know, like, is it working or not.
Yeah.
I mean, if I would live in another geography, I would probably be able to do full-time living from Udemy already.
Sure. Yeah.
For Israel, it's a little bit more. I need a little bit more.
Yeah.
But actually, for now, I would like to revive my Take Your Chance platform, and I would like to do a little bit different style, because on Udemy is not a community. Udemy is really courses. And the economics of Udemy is a little bit different. Udemy is a mass production market. So even if you have the best course out there, but your course is like for a niche topic, or it's too advanced for most developers, Udemy is not the best place to put your course on, because you won't earn a lot of from it. And actually, since on Udemy, even if you there's this, how do you call it? You just declare that your course is beginner, intermediate, or expert level.
Yeah.
And no matter what you declare, you get exactly the same people enrolling.
Yeah.
And if your course is not friendly for the beginners, you will get crashed in ratings, in reviews. Yeah. And that was my experience with one of my first courses, maybe the first one. Like people just, I wrote these courses for intermediate developers, and people were like, I didn't understand how you did this thing with the activity. And I kind of assumed that you know this. Yeah, but no, you cannot assume that on Udemy. And that's why most of the courses that are doing great on Udemy are A to Z courses. Take you from, none of them are A to Z, they're like the complete blah, blah, blah course, but it's never complete, because I cannot make
complete beginner's guide kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. I cannot create a complete course for Android. Android is so huge, and I know maybe a little bit of it, but I cannot create a complete course on Android. So surely an instructor who creates 5 different courses on different topics each year cannot create a complete course on Android, but he can create a beginner-friendly course. And that's what Udemy is great for. Mass production of these beginner-friendly courses, that's the target audience. And I just find myself a little bit less interested in that. So I do like I have a course on solid principles, which let's say it's not exactly beginner friendly, but non-beginners will not take it because it doesn't tell them anything. It doesn't have Android. It's not a specific.
They even know to look for.
Exactly, it's not a specific to their goal. So kind of this probably filters out like most of the people, and that's something that I do want to have on Udemy, because Udemy democratizes knowledge. It's very simple for people to find there, and if you have a good course, a decent amount of students will join. So that's great, but I would like to do some more advanced stuff, and Udemy is not the platform for the more advanced, more like niche topics, and I don't want to spend 3 hours at the beginning of each of my courses covering the basics. I would like, to get people who understand what they need and who value their time, who can jump into the course of, like, say, 2 hour, 3 hour course. And if they don't understand something, they will just go and Google it. They don't expect that I will feed them everything. They need the bottom line. They need the result. So that's why I decided to go back to my platform. And speaking about money, it's a very important motivation, but for me, unfortunately, it's insufficient. So I know that going and creating 2 or 3 more courses on Udemy, I will probably crush it, because I'm right there. I know the formula. I know what people look for, and I know the quality. I have the quality already, sound, video, and I see that my courses are highly rated. So I just need to choose one topic. Let's say Android development A to Z.
Sure. Yeah.
And try to promote this course, and I have the platform to promote this course, but it just doesn't sound like an interesting project for me. And maybe one day I will do, because I feel the obligation, because when I see other courses and I don't like many of them, I just, I never watched any of them, but I just see the curriculum, I review what they teach, and I don't like that. I don't think that the beginners should know everything, because I think many people, they take courses 40 hours in length and covers a lot of topics, where, as you said, for someone to get a job in Android, or even get a freelancing gig in Android, they need to know that really much, and they can learn on job.
I think that's the thing also that is missing from all of, at least from what I've seen, right, is I see a lot of courses, and I see YouTube stuff from people that I know their only exposure to that thing is their YouTube channel and what they learned yesterday that they're now teaching you today. But they've never worked in that thing. So it's it's cool, I'm teaching you about Jetpack Compose. But it's to be a contractor in the UK, I'm not going to need to know that for probably 5 years. It's not going to be a thing. And it's so people that are watching it, who are also not actually doing the job, they're I need to know so much stuff, I need to know this,
exactly.
I need to know this. And it's no, you could go through somebody's course, and if it's 40 hours, you need to know 10 hours maximum of the stuff. The rest of that stuff, maybe it will come up, but if it does, you can Google it and figure out really quickly how to use it. But the likelihood is it's not going to come up. And I think that's the other part from that's missing. But I also feel again, it's optics. If you had a 10-hour course that was get hired but in Android in 10 hours, and someone else has a course that's 40 hours, they're going to take the 40-hour course, because
that's exactly how it works on Udemy. That's exactly how it works for me, and that's exactly why I don't like to be on Udemy, because it's not just that. It's you have the length and you have the last update date. So my courses, I have this course which has been there for 4 years. I think 3 or 4 years, and it uses Java and uses all kinds of very old stuff, and it's still doing great. And I'm okay, it looks like people enjoy it. They get the knowledge. It's on architecture, so no one cares about which kind of. Well, some people do care, and they kind of give me 4.5 star, and they say it's a great course, but I would like to see it in Kotlin. But generally speaking, students who take it, is great. But it's not a high ranked course on Udemy, because it's not updated. I don't update it very often, and it's not very big, not very long. And it's an advanced topic, so Udemy will not promote it, or will promote it to a very small percentage of their audience, because most people there are looking for complete masterclass and whatever. So that's definitely something that I would like to do, to create my own courses on my own platform, and then see how it goes. And the other thing that I miss on Udemy is community, because you have just Q&A, which is relatively limited in my estimation, like in my experience. But there's no community there. There's no forum. There's no, like, you don't know the students. It's very difficult to create a personal connection with students. So I would like really to have people who are like, who'd like to learn from me, specifically, and be willing to pay for that and be willing to take it, because again, Udemy is a very low engagement platform. So most people who buy on Udemy, myself included, by the way, they either don't start their courses or for sure they don't complete it. Like the completion rate on Udemy is absolutely like in single digit percentage, I think, on average. So that's like most people, they just buy the course and never take it.
I was going to say I have like 3 or 4 that I bought, and I feel like I started all of them, and like the day you get it, you're like super pumped to watch it. And then you watch a little bit, and then you turn it off. You're like, I'll come back to it tomorrow. And then you just don't come back to it tomorrow.
Exactly, because like as a professional, you need to do shit.
Yeah, you have stuff to do. Yeah.
You don't have time to like listen through like 15 hours of rambling about something, which might be interesting and important for someone, but for yourself, you want to, that's why people. Florian had this amazing video of he recorded what people think I do as a software developer. He called and mentioned like what I do really do. He looks at some YouTube channel of some Indian guy explaining, and that's exactly what people want. People always, they kind of. It's kind of funny how they say like whatever you do, you end up watching some Indian guy on YouTube. Yeah. But that's exactly because they actually show you what you need to know.
Yeah, 100%.
And even though I find it very difficult myself to understand the Indian accent, oftentimes I just end up watching these videos because it's like 3-4 minutes, and that's exactly what I need to understand.
Straight to the point. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think there is like market for that. I really think that there's a market for that, but Udemy is just not exactly in that business.
No, I think YouTube is a huge market for that, because like I heard a couple of days ago, and I think this is true, which is like YouTube is the second biggest search engine in the world. So it's like people are searching on Google for answers, or they're searching on YouTube. And to your point, it's like if I'm looking to do something and I search on YouTube and there's a 2-minute video, it's 2 minutes. Like hopefully I get my answer. If I don't, I don't. It didn't cost me any money, and I didn't have to sit there for ages, and I didn't have to go for like a 40-hour course, like skipping a little bit to see like, are they talking about my thing here? Is it here? Is it here? So it's like, I think there's a huge market for that for sure.
Yeah, and actually on YouTube, the thing that I hate the most is like when you start watching a video and there's an introduction and some kind of animation. It's like, leave me alone. I need the answer. I think it's a huge market opportunity, and actually Florian, coding in Flow, he capitalized on that, right? So he didn't know anything, and I will interview him shortly, hopefully. So he didn't know anything. He started to learn himself, and then he started posting these videos on YouTube, which today have very many millions of watches, and his channel is the biggest one in Android niche. Now he branched off into something else. He wants to build his SaaS, which is very understandable and even admirable. But the fact that a guy who just learns by himself, posts it on YouTube, and basically creates this huge audience for himself, it just shows how big of an opportunity is there for people who want to create content. And his videos are like straight to the point. I watched several of them. With all the experience that I have, I too found myself, like, okay, let's see what Florian has to say about that, because I don't remember shit about it.
I was gonna say, but that's also another thing, is I think people think because we're so experienced, like we don't do that stuff. And it's like, no, like even if I'm at work and junior developer asks me a question, and let's say they ask me, why do we do this? And I know it's the right thing to do. Like, this is the way you do it, finish, right? I don't remember the reason why, because I just know this is how you do it. So then if I have to give them a serious answer, I would be going on Google, be like, why do you do this? And I'd be like, oh, okay, cool, that's why you do it. And then I'll go back and tell them. And they'll think like, oh yeah, Rob's a genius. But it's like, no, I'm doing the same thing that you could be doing and that everyone else is doing, which is like, if you don't have the answers, you go look for them. Like, we're not too experienced to be like, oh, I'm not going to watch Florian's video because, I've been doing this for 10 years and he's only been doing it for 9 or something. It's like, that's not how this works.
Exactly. And it's very interesting because it changed, right? Like 20 years ago, if you would be a software developer, you would just learn a lot of stuff by heart because you need to have all this context. And if you don't remember how to do some very basic thing, you will basically need to go and go through books maybe or something, which will be very time consuming. So today switched, everything is at your fingertips through Stack Overflow and sites like that. And therefore I myself, I try very hard to forget everything. Like that's something I think I read about this approach in Conan Doyle's books, so about Sherlock Holmes. So he said there that Dr. Watson tells him something and he says, okay, now I will try my best to forget it as quickly as possible. Yeah. Because it's not related to something to the thing that I do. Yeah. And that's for me exactly the same. Like if I do something, like let's say I set up room database several weeks ago, you asked me to do it now, I don't remember. I don't remember where you start. I don't remember how to do that. I will just go and Google it once again because that's absolutely non-important knowledge and I don't want my mind to be preoccupied with this kind of stuff. Yeah. I want to remember the general idea, general fundamental ideas why you need database. And for example, I've had this very strange experience of talking to a very senior developer, like not developer, CTO level person. Mm-hmm. And they asked me like, why do we use database? Why do we need AC database for like offline to build offline capable app? Why can't we just store everything in one big JSON file? Right. And it's like, okay, I need to Google that because I didn't have answer. Like, I mean, I was lost at words. As you said, I realized, I told them, look, I don't have an answer right now. This sounds like something that will lead to very big troubles down the road. I cannot tell you exactly why, but I tell you, we need the database.
See, this is the thing. That's the experience I have. Is like you're in the same situation. I know that we should use Room and JSON is a bad idea, but I don't know why it's a bad idea. I just know this is right. So if you want to answer, let me go and find out, and I'll tell you what I learned 5 years ago. Why we don't do this anymore. Yeah, or at least you need to kind of think about it for a couple of days, to sleep on it, and then it comes to you. But on the spot, like you know the fundamental, or the patterns. Patterns are very important to know, or the fundamental. So, for example, I don't remember how to use all kinds of concurrency constructs in, say, Java or Kotlin, but I know what atomicity is. I know what happens before is. Even though sometimes I forget and I need to remind myself because it's a very difficult concept. And I kind of construct everything from there. And if I need something specific, I can always Google. And I remember, you've got this semaphore and you've got this countdown latch, and sometimes I use one instead the other, then I Google it. It's fine. Like no one remembers that. And that's something also that, like maybe newcomers to software development, they concentrate, in my estimation, too much on the non-important stuff. Yeah. Like how do I use this framework? And the bottom line is that it's not important, because if you need to use it, most of the time you need to just set it up once, so you can Google it, and then it's done. And it's done. And then if you don't need to use it, like then you just, even if you forgot, you can always Google it. Yeah. But what can you not Google very quickly is stuff like concurrency, right? Stuff like architecture. That's something that you need to build a lot of context for, a lot of understanding, and it takes time. So that's the things that I think most software developers need to concentrate on, starting from some point, right? So if you don't know what programming language is, and you don't know how to write a basic like a hello world program, then maybe you don't need to concentrate on the architecture stuff or something. But once you know how to build a very simple application together, maybe learning about 3 different flavors of frameworks to load images and understand and have an opinion even on which one is better, maybe that's not the best investment of your time. That's what I think. I really like most of these new frameworks. I just skip them. I don't know what it is. And people are like, have you used that? I'm like, no. Have you used that? No. What do you think about it? Most of the time, I don't know enough to just voice an opinion, because I cannot know about every single framework. And sometimes I think, it's very interesting, because sometimes I think I kind of
my students on Udemy, they ask me all kinds of questions, and oftentimes it's not related to specific contents of the course. Sometimes it's near the content of the course, and sometimes it's way outside, just some general questions, like we have this problem and we consider that or that. And I'm like, well, guys, I just don't know.
Yeah.
I can't help you, sorry. And I think it's kind of maybe disappointing because they look up to me, you know, to know everything, and then I never worked with this kind of project, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a lesson in itself, though, right? Is that, like, they look up to you as, like, the guy who knows everything, and even the guy who knows everything doesn't know everything. So it's like, also, you don't have to. And I was going to say, I also think people learn stuff that they don't need to learn when really all they need to learn is the concepts. Because when I was lead developer on a project a couple of years ago, and when I started doing interviews, I was using the interview process that they already had, which was there was a tech test, and they'd get you to come in, and it was like, I can't remember exactly, but it was like, we need you to hit this endpoint and pull back a file, and then pass the file and display the contents in a list, something like that. And a bunch of, like, most of the candidates we had should be able to do that, right? It was fairly straightforward stuff. And I ended up making
Was it take-home assignment, or you had to do that
it was
on site?
I watch you do it. It's supposed to take an hour. If you're good, it should take 20 minutes. If you're medium skilled, it should take 40 minutes, right? It was really simple.
Really, creating an app that hits an endpoint, parses a file, should take an hour?
Puts in a list. Yeah, no, exactly. So I was using the test that they already had, right? It's the same test that I did to get the job. And I realized after doing it a few times, I was like, when we finish this test, it doesn't tell me anything about this candidate's skill level, because they all should be able to do it, or they should never have got the interview. And then one of the iOS guys was like, well, when I used to work in a different place, we used to do this test. And so I started getting people to do this test, and it was like a pseudocode test, right? So you're not writing a program that compiles. It was like concept. It was concept. So we would ask you a question. I don't remember exactly, but it was something along the lines of, like, we need you to model a zoo, and the zoo can have all different animals, and some animals are in a cage and some animals are in something else.
Object-oriented design test, basically.
Right. So they have to model, like, how do you do this stuff? And you get to watch, and you're like, okay, cool. Like, and we'll say to them, okay, there's a lion, and there's a cat, and there's a zebra, and you'll watch, and you'll be like, right, do they create a cat object, and then the lion extends a cat, or do they create a separate one? Do they create an animal object that everyone inherits from? Do they create a, bite interface, because a lion can bite, but a different animal can't bite? And you get to learn, like, all right, in 40 minutes, this is how they think, and you just assume they actually can write code in real life, because they hopefully wouldn't be here otherwise. And that was a much better test. So if they had learned all the stuff like MVVM, that wouldn't help them in this test. If you don't know the concepts, then you can't pass the test.
Yeah, but I would imagine that this interview was for a relatively senior role.
Yeah, it was for like a mid to senior developer. So I feel like if you were going to interview for a junior role, it wouldn't be like that. Like, you'd have some aspect of, do you actually know what you're doing in terms of, like, write me a hello world. It wouldn't be that, something a bit more complex. But at the same time, like, just going to show that what you learn doesn't necessarily go into essentially real life. Like, you can know all the things and still not be able to get the test because you don't know the concepts behind the things. You just know, like, Google says MVVM is the way to do things, so that's the way to do things. Why? Like, so if you take MVVM out of it, and I ask you, just, like, model me something on paper, just get pen and paper and draw this. If you can't do it, then that's where the knowledge is lacking, and not in all the different frameworks and tools and libraries that you could be using.
Yeah, I would say, like, for junior developer, I don't like the terms junior, mid, senior, but let's say for a less experienced developer, like, knowing how to is the most important stuff. So, if you come into the company and they use, let's say, MVVM, and MVVM, that's enough to learn the job. And of course, once you get past some level, like, if you hire someone for the position where they lead the team as a tech lead, I even know to the managers, like, you want someone who will lead the team technically, tech lead. You don't want them to necessarily know how to write. For example, me, I found out when I was working full-time jobs and was doing this kind of interviews, because I'm not doing interviews for years now, but when I used to, I found out that I'm very slow to write these interviews. It's like hours upon hours it takes me, and they're like, build a simple list. I don't know how to build a simple list. I just don't. I need to Google every single step. So I kind of very bad at these very small tasks. and especially UI stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm very slow on UI stuff, but I'm kind of very good at the big stuff because I can see the whole picture, right? I can see the big picture, and when I see the requirements, I kind of have the map, the path that I will go to implement that, and I know which part comes first, so that you don't get stuck down the road. So that's where I think this kind of interview question that you propose, that will be make much more sense to see how this person thinks in terms of like bringing it all together and not exactly writing one single small feature, which really like someone who completed, let's say, a boot camp or something 2 days ago will do much, much faster and probably better than I would.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So how do you, like, let's say you are freelancing and you record this podcast, and what do you do in your spare time? How do you like relax from the work, and how do you see, even, there's like in tech community, there's a big topic of burning out. And I think it's a very interesting topic to discuss, because I think I burn out regularly. Yeah. Regularly, I have these days when I like work until, let's say, 10 p.m., working into the night. And then the next day, I just cannot force myself to do anything. Yeah. So how do you avoid, or do you don't avoid? Like, I don't avoid these things. If sometimes you just need to, the deadline is more important than your next day. So sometimes you just need to make the deadline. Yeah. So how do you look at that?
So, I'm trying to think. I think I haven't had burnout probably since like 2014, 2015, something like that. And the reason I had burnout then was because I was doing 2 full-time contracts. So at the same time. So I'm working, contract for this person, contract for this person. They're both paying me day rate, so my time is split. And then one of the, this was 2014, so one of them was remote, but one of them, they wanted me in the office. So I'm in the office. Obviously, I'm the only person on this project, like, doing the Android app, right? So they don't know what they're looking at. So if I'm sitting here coding someone else's app, they have no idea. But it was super stressful, because it's like, I have a meeting with these guys at 1:00, but I'm also got a meeting with these guys at 12:30. So I'd literally have to go out, say, I'm going to get a coffee, go and do a meeting in a coffee shop for another company, come back. And like, it worked out. I did the work, but like trying to juggle all of that and like the stress of it was, it was too much. And obviously you can't say to them, listen guys, I'm working for someone else right now, like that wouldn't fly, right? That's,
by the way, something that you can do easily if you do like fixed price projects, right? They don't care.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but how do I not do it now? I think the main thing is, like, in terms of hobbies.
Do you work less? First of all,
definitely
do you work less?
I think so. I take regular, all the way through my career, I've only had one portion of time where I work like 18 months for the same company, right? And then aside from that, I've always done like 3 months or 6 months, and then I take like 3 months off. And the off might be, I'm working on my own app because it's fun, or, I go traveling for a bit, whatever, right? But it's not work. And then probably the last year and a half, I've had more work than I've not had work. But one, I don't take things on that I think would be stressful. So like if I'm if somebody gives me a call and they're like, we have a project, we need it to be delivered by, 2 months time, and it's going to be like a 24-hour job. It's a no, I'm not doing that. I don't answer my phone for work after I finish work. So let's say I start work. Usually I start work early because I wake up early, and then I'll take an extended break in the day to kind of balance it out. But let's say I start work at 7, 10 o'clock, I take the dog for a walk and, chill out for an hour or something, do a bit more work. But if my work day finishes, and I stop working like 4 or 5, depending on how much work there is. After 5, that's it. If somebody sends me a message and they're like, hey, Rob, it has to be like critical, like, hey, Rob, everything has exploded and the company's going to go out of business today if you don't fix it. Unless that's the case, like, because I've had projects, like one of the recent projects, the guy, one of the guys who's a project manager, he would ring the back-end guy at 7 p.m. to ask him questions. They're not critical, right? He just wants to know something. And the guy answered the phone, so now he ring him again and again. iOS guy, he would ring him up and say, oh, I'm testing today. I'm testing at 8 p.m., let's say. He's testing the app just now. He found a bug. and he'll ring him up and be like, I found this bug, when can you get it fixed, right? So now he's putting pressure on this guy to do work. And then I get a phone call from him like a week later. I just didn't answer it. And then he rung me back immediately. I didn't answer it. And then he sent me a message on Slack saying, hey, Rob, found a bug, whatever it was. I just didn't reply until 9 o'clock the next day. And he didn't ring me again out of work hours. And it's like...
Boundaries. You need to set boundaries. And by the way, that's a very interesting question. Do you have this kind of... Like, do you discuss contracts when you sign them? Is it something that you want to put this thing into contracts, or is it just something that you do on your own?
No, you don't. So the thing in the UK, there's a thing called IR35, which is like a HMRC, like government law, right? Which says if you're a contractor, they have inside and outside IR35. Why it's called IR35, I don't know. If you're inside, it means that essentially you are an employee of the company, but you are employed independently. So you're not on their books as an employee, you're on their books as a contractor, but you work the hours they say you work, you take the lunch breaks they say you take, exactly like an employee, just the contract's up a bit different. If you work outside IR35, which is how I work, how most people work, it is they are paying you to work on a specific project for a set period of time. But what you do during the day, they cannot by law tell you, Rob, you need to start work at 9 o'clock. You need to finish at 5. You need to have a lunch break for 1 hour at 12. Like, they can't do any of that stuff, right? Because it gets into like tax issues and stuff like that. That's the reason it's there. So I don't have to put in the contract, I finish work at 5. It's just that it says in the contract, like, I work a day. Some contracts say a day is assumed to be 8 hours, but they can't enforce the 8 hours, even if they put it in the contract, and they can't prove I worked 8 hours or 7, whatever, right? So really it's just, I set boundaries where if you message me after a certain amount of time, again, like it's like I'm very sympathetic. If the company's going to get out of business today because I created something that was an issue, I'm going to fix it. But if you're harassing me because your manager's harassing you because they want to answer in tomorrow's meeting, that's not my problem. Like,
or just because you don't have life.
Right, yeah, exactly. That's the other thing, is because this thing is your life. You think it's, yeah. And I think that's the other thing as well, is that people, like, you have to set boundaries of, like, when you work and stuff, but you also have to set boundaries of, like, what is your job role? My job role is to come in and build this thing you asked me to build. Everything else around it, the client's upset about this, or, like, I don't know, we set an estimate and then you've decided to bring the deadline forward for some reason. So now there's more that's not my problem. I told you it's going to take 5 days. If you accept that and then you tell me you want it to get done in 3 days, I'm not going to rush to get it done in 3 days. I told you it's 5 days. That's the deal. And you'll get developers that will take that pressure on. And then that's when they experience the burnout, because they're working 7 a.m. till 10 a.m. They're getting phone calls at 11 p.m. saying this is what's going on. And so they don't have any boundaries. And then once you get into that situation where this is okay, it's really hard to stop and be like, no, guys, I'm not. So for
exactly,
me,
you've
like,
been doing that for months. So why exactly?
Why are you not answering my calls? And like I've literally had messages where one of the guys that was answering the calls stopped answering, and then the project manager would message me and be like, Rob, have you heard from this guy, because he's not answering my calls? And so I feel like you have to set boundaries really early. Like, this is my job role, this is what you're paying me for, and this is when I work. And then if you don't like that, then it's fine. Like, either give me my notice or not. But
you get a notice as a freelancer.
Yeah, so you have a notice period. It depends on the contract. Some contracts you don't, but most of them you have a notice period both ways. So it's like, if I'm gonna finish tomorrow, I got to give them 2 weeks notice. If they want me to leave, but it's not strict. Like, if we both agree that I'll leave today, that's fine. But if I'm like, I really need the money, then no, I'm going to enforce that you need to pay me for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. That's the cultural, I don't know if it's cultural, legal difference or whatever, but
yeah.
I mean, in Israel, like, everything is open to negotiation, and most freelancers that I know, they don't even have contracts per se. Like, you would start working, and then maybe you have some verbal agreement, or maybe you sign something, but you don't have, like, the deliverable of the project is not exactly defined, and the boundaries are not defined. I take a very conservative approach. Like, I had experiences like you had, And nowadays, when I send a proposal for a project, I just write there explicitly, like the communication with the consultant is through his email address, and he has up to two days to answer this email. And so everything above that is like bonus from me.
Yeah.
And it's actually, I mean, I don't know if they read the contract, but you know, I say up front, like, guys, like, I'm here for this project. And if you have any questions, like, you are very welcome to send, you know, Slacks, whatever, usually Slack.
Yeah.
I'm on some crazy amount of Slacks.
Yeah.
And I don't
imagine.
I don't like Slack because people like treat Slack like, you know, if they send a message, they expect you to read it. And that's not exactly the type of the system that kind of built for that.
Yeah.
And so things get amiss and like, have you seen my Slack message? Which one of the 135,000 messages that were sent into this channel in the past 2 hours?
Yeah, this is the thing. It's like
boundaries, exactly.
Yeah, when I'm working on something, I'll set up Slack where I only get notifications if you mention me or if you mention the word Android. Usually, because if someone's talking about Android, they expect me to jump in because I'm working on that project. And then I'll set the do not disturb from 5:30 p.m. Because then
do you have Slack installed on your phone?
Yeah, I have it on my phone, but I have it on my phone mostly only because when I work, like if I decide to go out and take the dog out now and I'm working, I get a message, I can just respond and I don't have to account for if it's urgent, I can just be like, maybe I have to turn back, maybe there's a genuine issue, whatever. But I have it set up so do not disturb comes on when I'm not working, because then if someone sends me a message at 7 p.m, they'll see this person has do not disturb turned on, and then it's up to them to decide, because they'll have to press the button that says push the message through. Like, is it important or can it wait till the morning? And no one ever pushes a message through. Like, even when I'm away, if I take a week off, I'll tell them, listen, I'm on Slack. If you really need me, push a message through. No one pushes a message through. They send you a message. They know you're not going to get a response for a week, and it's fine. Yeah,
I went one step forward. I just don't install Slack on my phone. Some clients asked me to, and it was just, there's no chance I'm installing it. I told them I have an email address. If you need something urgent, I read my emails.
Yeah.
And something about emails, it's like, Slack is very simple and it's kind of casual, and emails feel much more important. So it actually works. Sometimes clients do send me emails about stuff, but it's never about, like just because it's easy for them. Yes. It's like usually interesting questions, something that actually needs attention. It does. And this works really well for me. And Slack is just, if we happen to co-work at the same time or they just send me in WhatsApp or something. They say me like, could you please enter Slack? And if it's like in the middle of the day, then we can take it. But I don't install Slack because I've got too many notifications, and actually I try to put boundaries because I don't have this strict of a routine like yourself. I do find myself sometimes work at evenings or weekends. I often work at weekends during weekends. So I need to set different types of boundaries. And for me, on communication boundaries, like you cannot reach me unless it's, as you said, if they send email and they tell me like something really urgent happened, then okay, I will join Slack and we will discuss what happened, or maybe we will jump on a call. But usually, like, my default is when clients call, my default is just, send them, sorry, I will call back you later or something.
I think it's really important to set boundaries. And I was going to say, I think the Slack on your phone thing depends entirely on how you work. So it's like the way that I work, if I'm working a day, there's an expectation that I'm available during that day. Even if like I don't have to be starting at a certain time and finishing at a certain time, there's this expectation that if I send Rob a message at 11 o'clock, he's working today, he should reply in a
I haven't thought about that. Yeah, if you charge hourly, that's like how you charge. If you charge hourly and they don't know whether you work or not, then they kind of feel that they're not expect you to be there necessarily. But if they pay you for that day, yes, of course they do expect you to be there.
Exactly. So then it's like it's easy for me to have it on my phone because, like I said, like if I go out for a dog walk, like some companies I've been at, literally I'll send a Slack like I'm walking the dog, be back in an hour. Nobody cares, right? It's fine. You get your work done, they don't care. Other companies, they're not as I don't know, like up to date is not the right word, but they're not as hip to it. So they'll be like, why are you walking your dog for an hour? Like, we're all sitting in the office. We have to do work. You're going to walk your dog. So I just won't say anything, and I'm walking the dog. And it doesn't make any difference to my work. But then if they send me a Slack, it's much easier for me to just be like, yes, or thumbs up or whatever. It is never important than it is for me to come back and explain, why I didn't reply to your Slack for 45 minutes.
That's basically interesting, right? It's every type of engagement or let's say every type of the way you charge the client imposes some kind of different rules. Yes, exactly. So if you charge per project and deliverable, for example, you need to make the deadline. Yeah. Like if you don't make the deadline, it's a problem. Or if you don't, like, let's say, sometimes I work on projects that I don't know ahead of time that something is possible. Like they come to me and they say, we need this and that and that. And I don't know if it's possible because it's not a trivial project. It's not just going to website, to their servers, bring data, show it in some UI, and that's it. Yeah. Sometimes there are like dependencies or like some custom hardware, and I don't even know whether this OEM they have SDK or they don't have SDK. Like what am I going into? So there's a lot of uncertainty about that, but I still need to make the deadline, right? And if you work daily, then basically there's the expectation from the client side that you will be working there. You will be there for them for the entire workday, right? From the morning until, let's say, 4 or 5 p.m., whatever is defined. But they do not expect you to work after hours, right? And if it's hourly, then it's basically like, it's not clear what the expectations are, but in some sense, they say they can tell themselves like, charge us. Like, we want you to jump on a Zoom call with us at 7 p.m. No problem. Like charge us for the call. You work for per hours or let's say weekends, right? Like why wouldn't you work on weekends if the company needs that? You work per hour. So different engagement types have different rules around them, and it's very interesting that different places, that's something that we discussed at the very beginning of this recording, right? So that's something that I discovered, that different places around the world have different kind of rules and cultures around these things, and I'm really curious about that and what kind of incentives and what kind of climate do these rules and different types of cultures impose. And another one is like productivity. Like, what would you say, like in your estimation, what would be the most productive way for the freelancer? What would be the most productive engagement for the freelancer? And on the other hand, for the company, what would be the most productive type of engagement in your estimation?
I mean, I think for the person doing the work, the most productive way of doing the work, like so for example, I don't know if this answers your question, but productive. Let me just. I will. Productive for the person in terms of not the output, but their goals, because the goal usually is really to make money, right? Gotcha. So, I mean, the most productive engagement, if your goal is to take. I gotcha. I mean, I don't know. I think it depends. Like in the UK, this is why I always encourage people like go do contract work. Like the most productive way to make money in the UK as a developer is contract work. Like
really? Like they pay more. Like if you get the same job as a contractor and as a full-time employee, 100% you get more money.
100%. So
that's absolutely amazing and interesting, because in Israel, for example, really, like it's many companies when they try to hire a contractor, and let's say $10,000 a month, that will be the full price of an experienced developer. And then they hire a freelancer, and the freelancer tells them, okay, I will work with you for $10,000 a month. And many companies will say, no, that's not what we want. We want you we want to pay you less money than that. So you say in UK, it's kind of given, right? So if you bring freelancer, you will pay more.
So it's given, but it's not. I feel like if you're not a contractor, you don't know this. So people that are in salary jobs, they think, whatever they're on, I'm on the highest salary I can get for Android developer, whatever. They think it's great, right? Because they have no idea that they could go be a contractor, and you could earn. I think I would say 100% of the time. And the reason being, like, I've worked at companies where I'm working with really, really, really talented permanent employees. And I don't know what their salaries are, but I know that they're not getting what I'm getting. And they know what I'm getting because some of them will have interviewed me for the role. And I always thought it was crazy that they would never go and get contract gig because they're so good they could go and get one tomorrow. And I think a big part of why they wouldn't is because like they feel like having a permanent employee is being in a permanent role is more secure than contracting. I think that was their thing. But yeah, in the UK, like to give you an example, because it's like you can go on LinkedIn or whatever and find numbers. Like the highest jobs that I've seen paid like salary wise for Android is going up to like top end of the scale is 180,000 a year, right?
Pounds.
And then yeah, that's like lead like top what you could get from what I've seen. Maybe there's a little bit more, but that's what I've seen. But for a contractor, the scale is anywhere from like £300 a day to like £750 a day, right? But then you have to factor in that when you're a contractor, you are doing contracting through your own business, which means that you are in control of how much salary you actually take from the money that you get, which means you're in control of how much tax you make. So in the UK, if you're on a £180,000 salary, let's say you take home 100 after tax. But as a contractor, if depending on how much you work, you make that much in a year, you could take home £50,000 and keep 48. So the next year you've still got money in the bank. That's how you would be able to take a year off and still pay yourself because you've worked 1 year and banked so much money. And then with the contracting thing, like as an employee, it's super frowned upon. You can't take 2 jobs. But as a contractor, you could take 2 jobs. So it's like depending on the gig. So like I've done it before where it's been horrible, and I've done it before where it's been both of the gigs for me was like super straightforward. I know exactly what I'm doing. I do 3 hours for these guys. I do 3 hours for these guys. All the work gets done. Nobody cares. I'm getting paid double. So it's like it almost always works out better depending on like your goals in terms of like what you want to do. Like if you want to be like senior engineer at Facebook, then go work at Facebook. If you want to make as much money as possible in the UK, at least, you should be doing contracting. And then there's the in-between where if you really like working for a company, then go work for them and earn whatever they pay you. It's up to you.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing to know because I know that, I mean, like, I think I would be like more expensive than most consultants and freelancers that work in Israel.
Yeah.
I've never run any numbers, but just, you know, from the fact that I've got many customers who are like surprised by my prices. Right?
Yeah, you'd be like the top price.
Yeah. And still, I know that if I would go to work for a major corporation, let's say Facebook or FANG, I would probably make more total compensation than from my freelancing, unless again I take like 2 or 3 clients. Okay, I can't compensate for that. But for me, living in Israel, I know that I can make much more money. Yeah, probably much more money being an engineer at, let's say, Facebook or Google or something. Sure. And I get calls from their HRs, not calls, emails from their HRs for very interesting positions, really. And so for me, being a freelancer is like, I know that I make less money, but the trade-offs are worth for me because I get different things, right? I get a freedom and I get I'm the manager of my time. I can do stuff on the side and I decide how much I work. So it's like, there's a trade-off. But it's very interesting that in England, in UK, you can do like both. You have the cake and you eat it too. So you also get some freedom and you also make more money.
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, like the top thing would not be money. The top thing would be how much freedom and autonomy do I get? Because I don't like having to work specific hours. Like I know I work best in the morning, right? Like whatever I do between like 12 and 5 is fine, but compared to what I do between 7 and 11 is trash. Like I know that. So it's like I get to do the work. If I just want to work in the morning, I can do the same output as someone else that's working all day. I get to do that. Whereas if I was like a salaried employee, especially like now I feel like it's a bit different because it's remote, so you can get away with a little bit more. But when it wasn't remote, like you can't just be in an office and work from like 9 till 1 and then just not do anything all day because people are going to look at you sideways. Even though you've done more work than the person sitting next to you, there'd be this expectation was like, if you can do that much work in 4 hours, imagine how much work you can do if you do 8 hours, 4 hours. Whereas now it's like you get the freedom, like being a freelancer or a contractor, you work when you want to work. And the only thing is like, is my output good? And is my output what you are paying for? Because essentially, like, however you break it down, hours or days or whatever, you're paying for something very specific. I want this thing. And however you break it down, if you pay me money and I give you this thing, then that should be fine, regardless if it took me 1 hour or 50 hours.
Yeah, unless, of course, they pay for hours, then they get
Yeah, I mean,
hours.
if they pay for hours and it could have took 1 hour and it took you 50 hours, then that's how it is.
Yeah, that's the very bad incentive of paying for hours, and I really don't understand how companies don't see that. I mean, if you pay someone per hour, so even for me, I don't like to be unproductive, right? So I quit. I really leave clients when I feel that something goes unproductive, and I don't take projects. And when I work per hours, it always gets to that point.
Yeah.
It can take 1 month, it can take 2 months, it can take 3 months, but I know that somewhere there I will get to the point where I'm absolutely unproductive and I don't do like I spend more time in meetings than working or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's really crazy for me that in Israel, like, companies don't understand that it's better to pay like fixed price, even if it's higher, and then guaranteed to get what you need. And for some reason, that's not the way in Israel companies prefer to work. Everybody looks for hourly work. That's just
I was gonna say, I feel like companies that do that, maybe it's in the hope that if Vasily's gonna charge me 20,000, but this guy's gonna do it for $100 an hour, but maybe he'll get it done in 10 hours, then it's a better bargain. As opposed to like paying for, like, I if it was me, 100%, I would be like, I want to know exactly how much this is going to cost. So if you tell me it's 30,000, fine, I've got a budget for 30,000, it's done. I don't want to pay you $100 an hour and it takes you, 50,000 hours. Like, that's not cool.
Yeah, I had to hire a lawyer lately, and one lawyer gave me a price in hours, and another gave me like a total price. Yeah, and like I went for the total price, even though I'm almost 100% sure that the per hour work will be less expensive. Yeah, because
but it's not worth the risk, right?
It's not about the risk. It's about even the I want the result. So I'm paying you money. I want the result from you. Yeah. I don't want to deal with how long it took you, etc. I need the result. So from my and it's also simpler because I'm allocating my budget. I know how much this will cost, and even if it's more expensive, I know that I'm paying you now half. Yeah. Another half when it's done, and it should be done by then. So you're not getting paid.
Also to your point, you're now incentivizing someone to work faster, because they're only ever going to get this much. So if they get it done in a quarter of the time of someone else, then they've made way more money than they would per hour. So,
exactly. Yeah. So it's very interesting to see. Okay, I think we're closing on to our mark. Yeah. Yes. And that would be, and that went very, very fast. Yeah, it did actually. Yeah. Actually, I have some more questions, but I think. For now, it will be great. So let's just wrap it up, and you tell people where to find you, what you do, what you're up to, and
cool. So if anybody wants to reach out, I am at Low Carb Rob, carb as in carbohydrates everywhere, and that is like on. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter. I mean, a bunch of other places, but those are the only 2 places I'll probably respond. The podcast is Coffee and Coding Podcast, which is coffeeandcodingpod.com. And you can also go to coffeeandcodingpod /Twitter and all that to just hot link to my profiles. I think that is everything. Yeah. So if you want to reach out and say hi, or if you've got questions, or if you want to be on the podcast and you have something interesting to talk about, because sometimes people just want to be on the podcast and they don't have much to say. So that's going to be a no. But I'm open to that.
Encouraging somewhat. Okay, great, Rob. As always, it's a real pleasure to talk to you. I feel like we could talk for 10 hours and we wouldn't cover all this. Sure. And hopefully one day we will be able to do it live, in real life. Yeah. With some beer along the way.
Sounds good. Yeah. Awesome. Great. Thank you very much for having me on. It's been really fun.
Thanks for spending time with me today.
No worries.